Following the conclusion of the War of the Ring, with Sauron defeated and his reign of fear dismantled, many enthusiasts are left pondering a lingering mystery. What became of the Dark Lord's essence once the One Ring was annihilated? Sauron was far from a simple mortal. He was an entity of ancient descent, endowed with an eternal spirit that could never be entirely eradicated. Despite his immense power, Sauron was not immune to the devastation of war. His arrogance and relentless desire for domination ultimately sealed his destiny. He invested a significant portion of his spirit into the One Ring, a decision that would lead to his downfall. As the ring was engulfed by the flames of Mount Doom, the very substance that contained Sauron's malevolence was consumed alongside it. Yet, the question remains: what happened to the remaining fragment of Sauron's spirit and his residual power once the One Ring was destroyed? Is it possible that Sauron's spirit persists, lingering like a specter in the shadows, waiting for malevolent forces to awaken once more? Let us embark on an exploration of Middle-earth's core, where the remnants of Sauron's legacy still echo, and the murmurs of his spirit drift upon the breeze. To be continued. In the void existed Eru Ilúvatar, the fundamental essence of all creation. From the infinite brilliance of his intellect, Eru Ilúvatar crafted the very fabric of reality, weaving a magnificent tapestry of existence, each strand marked by his divine influence. Initially, he brought forth the Ainur, the sacred beings, spirits born from his thoughts and infused with the power of song. These Ainur composed the grand symphony known as the Anulindale. Within this celestial harmony, the world was envisioned, and among the Ainur was the spirit that would later be recognized as Sauron. Some Ainur chose to descend into Arda to shape the world. The mightiest among them, the Valar, were given the guardianship of the world, while the Maiar, their lesser counterparts, served the Valar, embodying facets of their master's power and wisdom. Sauron was one such Maiar, a disciple and aide to the Valar Owl the Smith. However, he would ultimately betray his master by allying with Melkor, the original Dark Lord. This origin bound Sauron's undying spirit irrevocably to Arda, a sinister flame of malice that flickers perpetually, never to be wholly extinguished. In Tolkien's mythology, every sentient being holds an immortal soul. Consequently, death does not signify a true end, but rather the liberation of the soul from its mortal shell, allowing it to transcend the physical realm. When humans perish, their spirits move beyond the world's boundaries into the unknown, a destination even the Valar do not comprehend. For mortals, death is final and inescapable. Elves, upon meeting their end, journey to the halls of Mandos, where they find peace and reflection. After a period of serene renewal, they receive a new body, identical in form to their previous one. Despite this renewal, death remains a sharp sting for elves, sudden, unpleasant, and causing a long separation from loved ones, making it something they strive to avoid. In contrast, spiritual beings like Sauron are inherently formless. When they choose to interact physically with the world, they can assume a body voluntarily, a form referred to as a Fanyi. The Valar adopt shapes and colors inspired by their love for the children of Ilúvatar, modeling their forms after the vision Ilúvatar had revealed to them, emphasizing majesty and splendor. They do not require these forms except as we use clothing. They could remain unclothed and still retain their essence. As a result, the Valar can walk without garments, remaining unseen by the Eldar, though their presence is felt. However, when they wish to don attire, the Valar adopt forms, some male and some female. These manifestations do not always resemble the forms of kings, queens, or the children of Ilúvatar, as they might also express their own thoughts through majestic and formidable appearances. For the Ainur, physical forms are like garments, clothes worn to navigate the world and interact with its inhabitants. These bodies serve as vessels not intrinsically linked to their essence. Nevertheless, their forms are genuine and tangible, and prolonged use can lead the spirit within to form a deep attachment to the body. The Fa'ir of the Valar were not mere apparitions. They were tangible. They did not manifest as mental visions or projections by a superior spirit, but existed physically. When an Ainu inhabits one of these tangible vessels for an extended period, their soul begins to integrate with the form's essence, creating a profound emotional bond that evolves into a psychological dependence. The longer the spirit remains entwined with the vessel, the more their spirit and flesh meld, drawing the Ainu deeper into the material world. This bond strengthens as they indulge in earthly pleasures. The delights of the flesh, the warmth of a hearty meal, and the refreshing coolness of a drink become more than mere necessities. They transform into a symphony of sensations that anchor the Ainu more firmly to their whānau. Although originally self-arranged, these forms can evolve towards incarnation, especially among the lesser Maya. It is believed that the more the same heroa is used, the stronger the habitual bond becomes, making the self-arranged form feel less like attire and more like a customary habit. If, among elves and men, it is worn to shield against extreme temperatures, it quickly makes the naked form less capable of enduring such conditions. Should a spirit not bound by creation choose to use a heroa for personal gain or to enjoy bodily faculties, it becomes increasingly challenging to function without it. The most binding aspects are those related to the lives of the Valar. In their celestial grace, they occasionally indulge in feasts and libations, savoring these joys in moderation without becoming attached to their earthly vessels. However, when their fauna is used too frequently or with excessive fervor, the bond deepens rapidly. As previously mentioned, procreation significantly anchors a spirit to its whānau. This is evident in the story of Melian, a Maya who fell in love with the elven king, Elu Thingol. Through their love and the birth of their daughter, Melian became irrevocably tied to her earthly form. There are also darker methods by which an Ainu might become bound to their faena. Though not explicitly detailed, some tales suggest profound binding occurs when dark actions taint the soul. Melkor, after his fall, secretly departed far to the south. Despite being one of the Valar, he could change his form or walk unclothed like his brethren, a power he soon lost permanently. Unseen, he eventually reached the dark region of Avathar. There, beneath towering mountain walls and the cold dark sea, the shadows were the deepest and thickest. In Avathar, hidden and obscure, Ungoliant made her home. In a ravine she resided, assuming the form of a monstrous spider, weaving her black webs within a mountain cleft. She absorbed all available light, spinning it into dark nets of oppressive gloom, until no light could penetrate her abode, leaving her ravenously hungry. Melkor approached Avathar, seeking Ungoliant, and once again took on the form he had as the tyrant of Utumno, a dark lord, both tall and terrifying. In this guise, he remained indefinitely. Melkor enlisted Ungoliant to drain the radiant essence from the two trees of Valinor. Through this ominous alliance, he aimed to extinguish the very light that illuminated and enriched the surrounding lands and their inhabitants. However, following this vile act, Melkor found himself trapped, eternally confined in his mortal form, a captive of his own malevolence. He could no longer heal the numerous wounds he sustained. The flesh of his hand was scorched from seizing the Silmarils, his foot crippled by Fingolfin's strike, and a scar marked his face from Thorondor's talon, all of which would remain. It became evident, though it likely was understood earlier by Manwë and Namo, that while Melkor had dispersed his power, his evil, possessive, and rebellious will widely throughout Arda, he had lost direct control over it. All he retained as himself was a severely diminished spirit inhabiting his self-imposed, yet now cherished body. When that body was destroyed, Melkor was left weak and entirely without a home, adrift and unanchored. For an incarnate Ainu, losing their physical form through death is a traumatic experience. The sudden absence of what once defined their essence leaves them lost in a sea of confusion, disconnected from the world for an excruciating period. When Sauron was defeated during Númenor's downfall, it took him 10 years to reconstruct his form. After his second defeat by the last alliance of men and elves, it took over a millennium for him to rise again. Mirroring Melkor's plight, Sauron also found himself trapped within mortal flesh. Just as Melkor's essence was bound after darkening Valinor's brilliance, Sauron's spirit became incarnate following Númenor's collapse. A powerful wind surged, the earth quaked, the sky wobbled, and the hills slid as Númenor submerged into the sea, taking with it all its inhabitants, children, wives, maidens, and proud ladies, as well as its gardens, halls, towers, tombs, riches, jewels, webs, artistic creations, laughter, mirth, music, wisdom, and laws vanished forever. Sauron himself was overwhelmed by the Valar's wrath and Eru's curse upon sea and land, an impact far greater than he had anticipated, as he had hoped only for the demise of the Númenorians and the defeat of their proud king. However, Sauron was not of mortal flesh, and though he was stripped of the form in which he had wrought great evil, rendering him unable to appear fair to men's eyes. Nevertheless, his spirit emerged from the depths, moving like a shadow and a dark wind over the sea, returning to Middle-earth and Mordor, his home. At the dawn of his self-resurrection, Sauron manifested new flesh. In this exposed state, he became vulnerable to mortal weapons. Before these events unfolded, while he could still alter his form, he utilized his shape-shifting abilities with devastating effect. Throughout the First and Second Ages, he meticulously crafted his schemes, mastering the art of disguise and adopting attractive forms to deceive the children of Ilúvatar. In the year 1200, Sauron, disguised as Anatar, approached the elves of Eregion. With his concealed identity, he infiltrated the elves' hearts, persuading them to forge the rings of power with their own hands. Approximately 4 centuries later, in Mordor's blazing crucible known as the Cracks of Doom, Sauron forged his Master Ring, an act that sealed his destiny and earned him the enduring title of the Lord of the Rings. The concept of infusing spiritual power into physical objects is not novel. In Morgoth's Ring, it is recounted how Arda was marred by Melkor's malevolent touch. His objective was to integrate his spirit into the very material of Arda, necessitating the sacrifice of much of his power to achieve this dreadful fusion. In doing so, he left an indelible mark on the material realm, casting a pervasive shadow over the world. However, this process caused Morgoth to lose, exchange, or transform much of his original angelic mental and spiritual powers, while gaining a formidable hold over the physical world. Consequently, he had to be opposed primarily through physical force, with any direct confrontation likely resulting in significant material destruction, regardless of the outcome. This explains the Valar's persistent hesitance to engage Morgoth in open battle. A similar process occurred with Sauron. A substantial portion of his power and spirit was transformed into the One Ring. This exchange was necessary for him to exert control over the other rings. However, embedding such immense power within the ring introduced a critical vulnerability, the fatal flaw that would lead to his destruction. Additionally, as long as the ring existed, Sauron's spirit would persist. The ring's very presence, even though Sauron did not physically possess it, ensured that his spirit and magic remained active. Sauron would soon adopt another guise, naming himself Sigurd the Great. Empowered by his newly forged ring, he swiftly ascended to become a formidable king in Middle-earth. Men rallied under his banner, fighting for him and pledging their allegiance. In his arrogant vanity, Sauron adorned himself with a series of grand titles, each more exalted than the last: the King of Men, the Lord of the Earth, the Lord of the World, and most audaciously, the King of Kings. This final, most boastful claim incited Ar-Pharazôn, the powerful ruler of Númenor, to wage war against Sauron. Númenor's might proved overwhelming for Sauron's forces, leading to his capture and delivery to Númenor's shores. There, through deceitful words and dark persuasion, Sauron led Ar-Pharazôn and the Númenorians into the worship of Melkor. With whispered promises of eternal life, he incited the monarch to rebel against the divine order, urging an attack on the sacred shores of Valinor. As the Númenorian fleet's ships approached Aman, Eru Ilúvatar intervened. Manwë upon the mountain called upon Ilúvatar, and for a moment the Valar relinquished their governance of Arda. Ilúvatar demonstrated his power by altering the world's structure, creating a vast chasm in the sea between Númenor and the Undying Lands. The waters plunged into this abyss. The roar and smoke of the cataracts reached the heavens. The world trembled, and all Númenorian fleets were swallowed by the abyss, lost forever. However, Ar-Pharazôn, the king, and the mortal warriors who set foot on Aman were buried beneath falling hills. It is said that they remain imprisoned in the caves of the Forgotten until the final battle and the Day of Doom. As Númenor sank into the abyss, Sauron's physical form perished, but his spirit, undeterred, fled back to Middle-earth, seeking refuge in the ominous fortress of Barad-dûr. There, he discovered he could no longer change his form, becoming trapped in the grim visage he had created, forever bound as the Dark Lord. Yet his spirit emerged from the depths, moving like a shadow and a black wind over the sea, returning to Middle-earth and Mordor, his abode. In Barad-dûr, he reclaimed his great ring and dwelled there, dark and silent, until he fashioned a new guise, a manifestation of malice and hatred made visible. In the eye of Sauron the Terrible, few could withstand his presence. Among the fan community, there is a belief that this loss of shape-shifting ability resulted from a simple loss of power. The notion that Sauron weakened with each defeat, emerging diminished after every fall, is widely echoed within the lore community. However, Gandalf explains that if Sauron had regained the ring in the Third Age, his strength would have surged, making him more powerful than ever. He only needs the One Ring, as he created it himself, imbuing a significant portion of his former power into it to dominate all other rings. If he reclaims it, he would regain control over all, regardless of their location, including the 3 elven rings. Everything associated with them would be exposed, and he would become stronger than ever. Yet his essence became intertwined with the mortal realm, making him vulnerable, though not necessarily less dangerous. In adopting a physical form, Sauron was compelled to adhere to many mortal limitations. He could no longer allow his spirit to glide effortlessly through realms, or deceive those he wished to corrupt with a fair guise. This transformation certainly weakened him, and he now feared the destruction of his body more intensely than before. Consequently, he sought refuge within the vast fortress of Barad-dûr as the last alliance advanced into Mordor to besiege the Dark Tower. For 7 arduous years, Sauron remained within the fortress, gripped by fear as the last alliance persisted in his dark domain. Eventually, Gil-galad and Elendil entered Mordor, surrounding Sauron's stronghold, and laid siege for 7 years, enduring significant losses from fire and projectiles. Sauron launched numerous sorties against them. In the Valley of Gorgoroth, Anarion, Elendil's son, was slain, along with many others. In the end, the siege was so relentless that Sauron himself emerged. He battled Gil-galad and Elendil, resulting in both their deaths. Elendil's sword shattered under Sauron's might as he fell. However, Sauron was also defeated, and with the broken hilt of Narsil, Isildur severed the One Ring from Sauron's hand, claiming it for himself. At that moment, Sauron was vanquished, abandoning his body as his spirit fled to distant, desolate places, remaining unseen for many years. By mortally wounding Sauron, they tore his spirit from its vessel, delivering a severe blow that undoubtedly took a heavy toll on the Dark Lord, leaving him profoundly wounded. However, his separation was not merely from his body, but from something even more valuable, as Isildur took his father's broken sword and cut the ring from Sauron's black hand. The absence of the ring stripped Sauron of his capacity to amplify his dark powers, leaving him significantly weakened and inflicting an unhealable wound. To accomplish this, he had to relinquish a substantial portion of his inherent power, a common and significant motive in myth and fairy tales, into the One Ring. While he possessed it, his power on Earth was amplified. Even without wearing it, that power remained connected to him. He was not diminished unless someone else seized the ring and became its possessor. If that occurred, the new bearer could, provided they were sufficiently strong and heroic, challenge Sauron, seize mastery over all he had learned or accomplished since creating the One Ring, and thus overthrow him and usurp his position. Sauron was weakened in that his power was no longer enhanced by the ring, and he greatly feared another capable of challenging him, such as Aragorn, who could claim the ring and use it against him. However, Isildur soon died, and the ring lay hidden in the waters of Anduin for 2,461 years. Consequently, with the ring still in existence, concealed and unclaimed, Sauron was able to rebuild his strength, and the world began to feel the chill of his menacing shadow once more. Despite the ring's absence, Sauron remained a formidable force. Although his defeats had delayed his return, the year 1050 of the Third Age marked the resurgence of his dark presence. It appeared that the evil force in Mirkwood had been expelled by the White Council only to re-emerge with greater strength in Mordor's ancient strongholds. The Dark Tower had reportedly been rebuilt. From there, his power spread extensively, and to the far east and south, wars and growing fear took root. Orcs began to multiply again in the mountains. Trolls roamed freely, no longer mere brutes, but cunning and armed with terrifying weapons. There were also whispers of creatures more dreadful than these, though they remained unnamed. Sauron reappeared, forging his body anew, and it became clear that he now bore the scars of his trials. Upon reconstructing his form, he realized he could not restore the finger that Isildur had taken from him. Despite bearing the marks of this ancient wound, if he had merely reclaimed his lost ring, he would have become such a force in the world that none of Middle-earth's free peoples would possess the strength to oppose him. Regarding this matter, my lords, you now possess sufficient understanding of our predicament and Sauron's. If he regains the ring, your valor will be futile, and his triumph will be swift and absolute, a victory that no one can predict until the world's end. Upon reclaiming the ring, Sauron would ascend to unparalleled power in Middle-earth, ruling absolutely as all would succumb to his will under the weight of their despair. Naturally, Sauron would forever be separated from the portion of himself he invested in the ring, destined instead to watch as the ring was cast into Mount Doom's fires. In the vivid depiction of Sauron's downfall, Tolkien offers tantalizing clues about the Dark Lord's ultimate fate. Stand, men of the West, stand and wait. This is the hour of doom. And as he spoke, the earth trembled beneath their feet. Suddenly, a vast darkness surged into the sky, flickering with fire, towering far above the Black Gate and the mountains. The earth groaned and quaked. The towers swayed, toppled, and collapsed. The mighty rampart crumbled. The Black Gate was obliterated, and from afar, initially dim, then growing and ascending to the clouds, came a drumming rumble, a roar, a long, echoing roll of destructive noise. "The realm of Sauron is ended," proclaimed Gandalf. "The ring-bearer has fulfilled his quest." As the captains looked south towards Mordor, they saw a massive shadowy shape rising against the cloud cover, impenetrable and crowned with lightning, filling the entire sky. Enormous it loomed above the world, stretching a vast, threatening hand, terrible yet powerless. But as it leaned over them, a powerful wind swept it away, and it vanished. A silence then descended. This passage illustrates that with the ring's destruction, everything bound by Sauron's will collapsed into chaos and disarray. His commanded forces and the lands he controlled disintegrated, unleashing a torrent of upheaval that signified the end of his dominion. Sauron transformed into a colossal shadow, vast and all-consuming, stretching across the sky like a dark, terrible storm. He reached out towards the assembled men at the Black Gate in a final act of malice. In this dramatic scene, it becomes apparent that his spirit endures like a wraith even after the ring's destruction. However, his shadowy form was ultimately swept away by a great wind, suggesting that he had diminished to such an extent that his only form was weak enough to be carried off by the wind, possibly sent by Manwë, but a wind nonetheless. This lingering trace of Sauron's essence stood as the final manifestation of his spirit that mortal eyes would ever witness. Sauron's spirit, now without form, drifted as a spectral echo, unable to influence the world. In The Return of the King, Gandalf's prophetic words vividly depict the destiny awaiting Sauron if the ring met its fiery end. If it is destroyed, then he will fall, and his fall will be so profound that none can foresee his rise again. he will lose the greatest part of the strength inherent to him from the beginning, and all that was created or initiated with that power will crumble. He will be maimed forever, becoming a mere spirit of malice that gnaws itself in the shadows, unable to grow or take shape once more. Thus, a great evil is eradicated from the world. This passage conveys two significant truths about Sauron's destiny. Firstly, it describes a fate where his tormented spirit gnaws itself in the shadows. Sauron, in his unending quest for dominion, desired to impose strict order upon all realms and peoples. However, fate delivered a harsh twist. He must witness the peoples of the world enjoying unbounded freedom. They dance and dream beyond the restrictions he sought to enforce, liberated from the rigid structures and chains of command he aimed to impose upon them. For a being like Sauron, who thrived on controlling and subjugating the children of Ilúvatar, this existence of anarchic freedom is a form of exquisite torment. Observing what he perceives as chaos, where every soul roams freely and unbounded, causes relentless agony that conflicts with his very nature. In the shadows, his spirit writhes, unable to impose his will upon the world he once endeavored to mold into perfect order. Secondly, the quote also indicates that Sauron can no longer manifest in a tangible form or exert his will upon the physical realm in any significant way. Tolkien confirms this profound fate in letter 131. There was another vulnerability. If the One Ring were truly destroyed, its power would dissolve, diminishing Sauron's own being to the point of vanishing, reducing him to a shadow, a mere memory of malicious intent. However, there is one final quote that might offer an alternative perspective on Sauron's ultimate resting place. Among his named servants, the greatest was the spirit the Eldar called Sauron, or Gothor, the Cruel. Initially a Maya of Aule, he remained powerful within the law of that people. Throughout Melkor, the Morgoth's deeds upon Arda, in his vast works and cunning deceptions, Sauron played a part, only less evil than his master, as he long served another rather than himself. In later years, he rose as a shadow of Morgoth and a ghost of his malice, following him down the same ruinous path into the void. This account from the Valar and Maiar lore, as detailed in the Silmarillion, explains that Sauron, stripped of his former power, would be cast into the timeless void, a boundless chasm of darkness, where he would rejoin Melkor. In this infinite realm of night, the two Dark Lords would linger together, biding their time in the vast emptiness, awaiting the world's end. However, it is important to note that the Silmarillion was not published during Tolkien's lifetime. While it encompasses much of his vision, it never received his final approval. We must also consider that the phrase "path down into the void" might simply be a dramatic expression indicating that Sauron followed in Melkor's footsteps, akin to saying that Sauron descended into darkness like Melkor. Moreover, since this lore originates from the Eldar, we must acknowledge that the Eldar, with their own biases and perspectives, might not be entirely reliable narrators. Therefore, relying on works published during Tolkien's lifetime clarifies that Sauron's disembodied essence is condemned to drift aimlessly, lost and yearning, eternally waiting for the twilight of all things. In Morgoth's Ring, it is suggested that Tolkien speculated whether a Maya reduced to impotence might find a new existence as one of the occult beings that continue to inspire fear today. Melkor had corrupted many spirits, some as great as Sauron and others less so, like the Balrogs. These beings, once powerful and perilous orcs, become increasingly earthbound through embodied procreation, unable to return to their spiritual state or demon form unless released by death or destruction. Consequently, they dwindle in strength. Upon release, they would, like Sauron, be damned. This reduction to impotence leaves them infinitely recessive, still harboring hatred, but unable to exert it effectively physically. They might exist as a very diminished dead orc state, resembling poltergeists. Considering our world is the same as the once Middle-earth, it follows that Sauron's spirit still lingers among us today. Does he retain enough power to influence the physical world in any capacity? Could he perhaps act as a poltergeist, moving objects and creating subtle noises to make his presence known at opportune moments? He might be observing any one of us right now, a pure essence of malice and hatred, watching and cursing our freedom as we celebrate his downfall. Thank you for tuning in to Realms Unraveled. Before I take my leave, we invite you to light the beacons and call for aid. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button below. We would also greatly appreciate it if you would consider subscribing and clicking the bell icon. By doing so, you will be notified whenever we upload new videos. Thank you once again for watching, and until next time, farewell, fellow explorers of Middle-earth.